Teachers of Reddit, when did you find out that your student is a sociopath? Story 1. Not a teacher, but at my kid's daycare, there was a bona fide sociopath in the making. This kid would inflict harm on others with a genuine smile on his face like he was playing. But he was secretly enjoying it. Hitting, biting, punching, kicking, breaking toys, destroying artwork, but very secretive and carefully planned when teachers or parents weren't looking. He was really intelligent and well spoken for his age as well. Yeah, he was asked to leave after a few years, and pretty much every parent there was relieved. Story 2. This one happened just the other day, and obviously I am going to be anonymous about it to protect the child's identity. Let's call her Abby. So I'm driving a minibus of students home from a basketball practice when suddenly Abby starts screaming. Did that have peanuts in it? I'm allergic to peanuts. She begins hyperventilating and crying and actually makes me pull over so she can get off the bus and throw up. We're about 15 minutes from the school and I'm literally having a panic attack. So I call the principal and ask what should I do? Do we have an EpiPen on hand at the school, etc.? She seems confused and puts Abby's grandmother on, who tells me she weren't aware her granddaughter, who is claiming that she can barely breathe, had any allergies. When we got back to the school, I was about ready to faint, and the principal brings out her registration paperwork to show me. No listed allergies. She isn't allergic to anything. It was all an act. The hyperventilating, the crying, even the throwing up was all for attention. Story 3. His sister annoyed him so he unalived her kitten in front of her. Complete and utter lack of remorse. Just didn't see animals as any different from toys. Violence towards animals during childhood is very common in serial unalivers. Story 4. Had a high school freshman who was a very boisterous kid and youthful for his age. One day he was being disruptive and acting up, so I asked him to step out of the room with me while my co-teacher continued the lesson. I calmly explained to him why I had taken him out and why his behavior was disruptive, and asked him to be more mindful in the future. He seemed attentive to me and to understand where I was coming from. Then, just as I was about to go back in with him, he told me, "Okay, I'm gonna start crying so everyone thinks you yelled at me." I immediately put the brakes on. I asked him why he wanted to do that, why he felt it was okay to lie like that, and why he wanted to make me seem like a bad person when I had been very polite and thought we had a good interaction. He didn't have any good answers with me, but we had already spent enough time out of class. I got him to agree to go in quietly, and we went on with the lesson. Needless to say, it was a sign of things to come. He turned out to be a gossiping, backstabbing little social monster. The more mature kids learned to keep their distance from him, and he cultivated friendships with other kids who enjoyed his acting out and emulated it. We finished out the year on reasonable terms. But as he went on to other teachers with different classroom styles, his behavior worsened and derailed many classes. Story 5. A 5-year-old kindergarten student started crying. He didn't want to go into the classroom. His mother told him he had to go anyway. The kid stopped crying, took off his belt, and started whipping his mother. As a teacher, it was the first time I was completely speechless. Story 6. Had a child who enjoyed stalking and terrorizing younger children at daycare. You could see he got a wicked kick out of it, and we were basically powerless aside from taking children away from him. He was beyond awful. A colleague looked after a child who was so jealous of his younger brother that he was slowly poisoning him by adding household cleaners to the milk. When his parents tried to get him to have milk one day, he refused and admitted there was cleaner in it, at 4 years of age. Seriously, God help us, because some people are just not right from the very beginning. and I don't believe will ever come right. Story 7. I had a student while I was doing my students' teaching, 8th grade. He was constantly in trouble, but during the times he was in class, he just stared off with the most vacant look in his eyes. It truly scared me. It was downright creepy. One day he was up at the whiteboard writing some stuff. I think it was correcting sentences, with a bunch of other kids who were doing the same thing. I wasn't watching the kids at the board, and all of a sudden I heard this blood-curdling scream and looked over. He had brought a hypodermic needle and had stabbed the girl next to him in the leg. He had been holding it in his hand the entire time, just waiting for the opportunity to stick someone. It was, of course, terrible, but the girl turned out okay. The worst part besides that was how he laughed when security came to get him. Ugh, I'm shuddering now just thinking about it. Story 8. Story from a friend. As the new teacher, he got stuck doing after school detention a lot during his first year as a high school teacher. He didn't mind because he always stays late anyway with paperwork. Now, at some point, he had only one student for detention, and he says she is the worst human being he's ever met. She told him that he will start marking her as having attended the detention and all future detentions, or she was going to say that he assaulted her. Luckily for him, there are both cameras and microphones in the classrooms, so that never happened, and he did report it to the principal. She was later expelled for bringing a razor to school and removing another girl's ponytail in the bathroom. Story 9. Two twin 8th grade boys, literal effing lunatics, threw their dog across their living room and it landed on the edge of the table. They said it was unalive but still moving, and they buried it. Dude, they buried a live effing dog. This was confirmed by neighbors, and they're now in the appropriate facilities. Messed up times a million. Story 10. I worked with a student who would fit this description. The stories of the things he did are extensive. One example is that he got up from his seat to throw something away. On his way back, he walked up behind a student who was distracted working on his assignment. Out of the blue, he pushed the working student's head forward and into the desk. He gave him a bloody nose. There had been no previous altercation or source of friction between the two. His parents were divorced, and his mother was too afraid of him to have him during the days she had custody. His father would move him frequently from school to school once his behavior got so bad that the school started the process of getting him into psychiatric care. Story 11. So I am not entirely sure if this is sociopath or psychopath, but I had a child that was creepily into my pregnancy for the first 7 months. He wanted to name her, talked to my belly, etc. Then one day, it clicked that I would have to leave, and he got really close to me and whispered, "When you come out, I'm going to unalive you with a hammer. I hate you." I was shocked, so I took him with me to the office. The licensed specialist in school psychology asked why he said that. He replied that, "It will take her away. I want it gone so she stays here." He was on a lot of medication for his incredibly violent tendencies. He had tried to unalive his sister before by pushing her in front of a bus. His mother kept him locked in his room at night because she had found him standing over her with a razor. Edit. The child was a male, 10 years old. His mother agreed to have him committed after he attempted to unalive a support dog using a pair of scissors. Mental health and child protective services were both involved. I haven't seen or heard from the family since I left the district. Story 12. I have seen students display all sorts of extreme behavior over the past 20 years, teaching teenagers in challenging schools. The one kid that I was convinced was a psychopath just quietly refused to do anything he didn't want to. I never saw him angry, and yet I did see him hit people and say awful things to them. He was always eerily calm, He was tiny and very cute, but he used to manipulate people and watch chaos unfold with these huge unblinking puppy dog eyes. It was like he was carrying out an experiment. Anyway, that was when he was 14. He's 19 now and serving a life sentence for a horrific murder. Story 13. Not a teacher, sorry. But when I was younger, maybe 8, I remember going to some family gathering way out in the country. There were tons of distant relatives there. Great grandparents had 11 kids, and therefore lots of cousins I didn't know. One girl, probably 4 or 5, was scary. All of us would try to play with her, and she would just act strange. But one thing I really remember was someone was showing us some baby chicks, letting us hold them and pet them. My mother had just explained to us, be very gentle, they're babies, etc., etc. Well, this little girl is holding a baby chick in her palm, looks right into my mom's eyes, and just squeezes this chick until its eyes bulge. They stopped her, and to my knowledge, the chick was fine. But I will never forget the look in her eyes. Immediately after this happened, her dad scooped her up in his arms, and she just looked back at all of us, smiling maniacally. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell button to receive notifications to my latest videos.